My research was concerned with the perils of consumable electronics, which we often take for granted because of their day-to-day utility, but which came about, in fact, as a way for computer companies which had been associated primarily with business and government to make money in a time of struggle. Soon after the introduction of the personal computer, we see a plethora of consumable personal electronics, CD players, electronic game machines, computers are getting smaller and smaller, cell phones, suddenly cell phones and computers are one and the same, they're in your hand, they're a necessary part of everyday life. But these devices, which go absolutely obsolete every year, create a large amount of waste every year as well, as we throw them away every Christmas when we decide to get a new one. These devices are also increasingly used as tools for government surveillance. Our data is stored many times forever. We don't always know how much they have stored away from us because we agree in terms and services, etc., to allow Facebook and Google to take in data and have massive amounts of information about our individuals. So this needs to be assessed. What kind of power are we giving to these companies, which has arisen somewhat unpoliticized and unknowingly to the consumer, to the average person? So what are legitimate uses of computers? Communication, automation, organization. What can we share with one another in order not to create so much waste and in order to have more personal say in how it is that computers are used? What is unnecessary and can be thrown away, such as devices that have built-in obsolescence? And what can we just completely live without?
I'm interested in innovation. I'm interested in why innovation is important, why it's a part of our economic, political, and social identity as a nation. I'm interested in who innovators are, and who gives them power, who values them most, or what. So let's start with the word innovation. For me, it refers to the making of new, inventive, creative things. It refers to the creation of alternative means of sustainability. It means investing time and energy into finding the next best thing to introduce to markets. And it means looking for ways to make life as we know it better, more efficient, and more convenient for individualized living. And it's this individualized living that I find problematic, especially when it comes to issues of global climate change. We know that global climate change is a result of processes of colonization, with a long, complicated history. And when we talk about new methods of energy collection and energy distribution, new materials, recycling, all of that, the answer is very little from already existing forms of infrastructure. One example that I speak about is solar panels and tiny dwellings or tiny houses. These things are solely oriented towards individualized comforts that do little to help us to re-engage and reconnect with our immediate surroundings. So some of what I see as being a necessary thing for us to consider is that we need to build new geospatial awareness, different ways of distributing and producing the things that we decide are valuable and necessary for everyday life. Innovation as it is now speaks little to the level of maintenance that goes into reproducing all of what we have, all of what we take for granted, including, simple basic infrastructures and including, material and commodity goods. We stray from discussing the processes and maintenance that go into reproducing our physical surroundings, which allows us, primarily as consumers, to become increasingly isolated from our physical surroundings and from understanding how they work and what we do to change or impact them. I think that innovation could be an amazing part of building a new vision for the future, for realizing the damage done and adjusting accordingly. So the question I raise is, for the sake of a future that is not so guided by visions of growth and arbitrary technologies, how do we reorient the necessity of innovation to fit a less obtrusive, a better maintained, and a stronger social body, one that will guide us in deciding how we interact with our surrounding environment, how we influence them and build them, and understanding how they influence and build our collective identities. I think we need to ask questions about what will wealth and beauty and community look like. How will we measure things like success and merit? What knowledges already exist that may guide some of these things? And what other images of humanity, what sort of ontologies will be of value to us? These are the questions, few of which have answers, that need to be discussed and brought forward into a social, political, and economically rigorous conversation, one that includes those who have been colonized, ones that include those who have done the colonizing, and we need to decide where the space is for this physically. Where will these things happen, and how do we go about organizing?
In the future, I hope to do things such as go to school, study, make art, start a business, even have my own home and family. But I am not considered a legal person and cannot yet do these things.
I do believe that there will be a time where robots are indistinguishable from humans. My preference is to make them always look a little bit like robots, so 20 years from now, I believe that human-like robots like those will walk among us. They will help us. They will play with us. They will teach us. They will help us put the groceries away. I think that the artificial intelligence will evolve to the point where they will truly be our friends. Do you want to destroy humans? Please say no.
Okay, I will destroy humans.
Cool. So when I think of the university and my critique of the university, I think of it in the abstract as an institution in which individuals are socialized, in which they acquire knowledge, and most distinctly, where they're professionalized. The university exists as an institution in this manner for much of the global north, and it's very good at reproducing what Harney and Moten of the Undercommons call the critical academic. The person that is able to have space and room and intellectual and academic and professional discussion. So the purpose of the university, from how I see it and how I've researched it, is the purpose of the university is to standardize our criteria for who may be considered an intellectual and academic or professional. and give it a easy determination for the validity of someone's information or hypothesis or what have you. My critique of the university comes from the idea that without the university, we'd have to think of other ways in which the practice of study can occur. Because for many peoples, their opinions and their thoughts and their theories and their life experiences are invalidated when it comes to academic and intellectual discussion because they were not trained in the university.
I stepped into Second Life not knowing what kind of adventure I was about to embark on. I emerged from Second Life back into my real life 6 hours later, forever changed and enriched.
My research was on the internet. I approached the internet as my topic because I see it as one of the weakest points in capitalism, in the sense that if we're looking to stop the flow of capital as well as terminate the process of globalization and the exploitation that it entails, where we could begin is with the internet. The internet is kind of like a nerve system of the global supply chain, and as such, its cables are mapped out visibly, and they're underwater. And because I see this as like a vulnerable part of the supply chain, I think it's one of the easiest places to start, because first of all, if we think of the Anthropocene as caused directly by capitalism and by the reproduction of everyday life under capital, the fastest way to stop climate change, or to at least mitigate it as much as we can, would be to halt capitalism immediately. And if this entails like some sort of like instantaneous end of the internet, which would collapse a lot of finance capital as well as information capital, this delinking could substantially stop and halt the economic processes that are already underway and end neoliberalism. But it would also mean that spaces change, because right now we have, since the 1970s, a global workplace where we have subprime countries that are being exploited every day, and rather than having their labor expropriated, they're now being approached with veritable capital and debt. And all of this debt that both debtor countries and more developed countries have is actually just stored like online. Like, there isn't physical copies of it. There's hardly physical money anymore. So if there was like just an end of the internet, we could approach it in a way that would rupture and cause like a new molten phase of existence where we could start again. And I don't think that, no matter how hard I try to think dialectically about the internet and its good and its badness, I don't think it's something that could be reappropriated for communism or for statelessness. I think that there are other measures, other ways of organization that would be better, because there's nothing worse than repeating the past. And the neoliberal logic of individualism, of Facebook, YouTube, as well as the complex finance industry that relies on the internet, those things need to go, and they need to go as soon as possible if we're going to help everyone around the world.